Vocals are pretty much always the most important element in a mix. Yes, even in a deathcore mix. In this clip, Joey and Nick show you how to dial in a killer vocal mix whilst using track spacer to almost conduct the vocal and keep it locked into place. Check it out and enjoy.
We have a track spacer thing going on so that the vocals can always push through the mix. The way that we accomplish that is we have the vocal bus going into the side chain. Then the track spacer is on the instrumental. So when the vocals come in, like they can basically carve out their own frequencies in the whole instrumental mix. And it's very subtle, like... So basically, like, the more we move that knob, the more vocals you're going to get. You can obviously take it to places that's way too crazy. But just having it, that subtle bit, like, allows the vocals to pretty much always push through the mix. And then you can see that we have the low and the high cut set so that it doesn't go too crazy in the high end frequencies and the low end frequencies, because that can start to sound a little strange. So we kind of...
Where do you guys have that set?
Let's see the frequencies. 300-ish to 6K.
Okay. Is that something you guys dialed in via experimentation, or you just kind of like throw it in on each song and it changes?
Yeah, it varies from song to song and from voice to voice. And
yeah, it usually sits around here though. It's pretty normal. Like you can it's like crazy if you do this. It's like getting rid of all that low end frequency. Like we don't want that.
The places where you do the cutoffs is what's going to be consistent. They're not going to move up and down based on the vocal input. So you want your high end to be consistent. You want your low end to be consistent. It's that mid range is where everything is fighting each other. And that's where track spacer comes in and just makes our life so much easier, because you can just, instead of having to go in and like try and automate all that stuff with like EQs or whatever, or like fader movements, you just have track spacer just does it for you. So that's the vocal routing. So for the vocals, we're using a gain reduction plugin, which is my vocal compressor. The thing that's cool about that plugin is that, like, no matter what you put in it, it'll just make it the same volume coming out. It has so much compression on it that it'll just always make it the same output level. Yeah. Like, did you guys see that? He's like turning the input level of the vocal up and down, and you can't even tell that it's happening. Wait, watch it. So like gain staging vocals isn't even a thing anymore now. Then those all just go to a bus, which manages all the vocals together. And that's all it is. The setting is just default. There's nothing interesting about that. Just load the plugin and close a window. You're good. We're also using Pro DS for de-essing the vocals, and I'm pretty sure this is also default.
Yeah, it's just default setting.
Yeah.
Make sure it's on single vocal.
That's all it is.
Compress it, de-ess it. That's it.
Compress and de-ess, and that's it. Every layer. And I think they're all the same. And then when we want a vocal to not be right down the center, we use side widener to just push it out to the sides. Mode 2, 100% width, 100% tone. Let's open up the whole channel, I guess.
Okay.
So a couple things going on here.
So I put it in the order.
Yeah, we'll try to put the plugins in order so you can see what we're doing. It's a 1080p screen here, so
usually work in 4K.
So at first it's Soothe, which is to automatically EQ the vocals essentially. So like anytime the vocals, like some reason they jump up in 4K out of nowhere, well now Soothe just pushes it back down. Or let's say there's a part in the song where there's 4 vocals at the same time, and then it goes right to a part where there's only 1 vocal. You're not going to worry about that either, because Soothe is just going to flatten it out. Then it goes into another de-esser, which is also on default. Now this time we put it on all round mode. Let's say you have a de-esser on each individual vocal, but now you have 2 vocals at the same time. They're both de-essed, but the S's are now doubled up. This will help keep that in line. Then it goes into this vintage EQ, which is just doing some sweetening.
Yeah.
Doing some boosting around, what is that, 5K, 3K, and
he's using SM7B, so I just want a little more top end on there.
Yeah, the SM7B is pretty much a dull sounding microphone, and you need to put some EQ on it to make it sound nice.
Is there any particular reason that you use the vintage EQ in Ozone versus, say, stock EQ or Fab Filter is popular? You know what I mean? There's a lot of different EQs. Is there like a certain tone this one has that makes it stand out to you guys?
I think this is just what we landed on. We tried a bunch of different ones, and I don't know, this one is like the most simple sounding, and it was like, yeah, smooth. So
one reoccurring theme you'll see, this mix is not usual for us, but also the reoccurring theme is that we experiment like a lot. You know, we might use the track spacer trick in every mix, but the compressions and EQ settings and other things that are around it can be different from mix to mix. And we're always changing up drum samples and using different software and like just trying to keep it fresh. And then it just goes into a delay and a reverb, and the analog button is off.
Why would you want to turn that off?
The real secret is turning it on. No, I'm just kidding. So you can see Soothe is like doing a lot of work, right? I don't even know how a human would be able to sit there and take all those little EQ points and move them up and down. Like,
is there a specific reason you have Soothe set? Oh, Soothe. I can't speak English today. Set to hard mode instead of soft on the vocal bus.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I just mainly wasn't catching the harshness in there.
One thing I can tell people, like, just to try and give people advice about how to like work with plugins, is that you can't hurt anything.
Yeah.
You know, like you can just click buttons and
like don't be afraid to like mess stuff up. You can always go back.
Yeah. A lot of times you'll see us, like, we kind of create our own little, I guess, workflow for how we use plugins. Like if we open Soothe, like the very first thing we'll do is figure out, like, do we want to affect the low end or the high end? And then once we've made that decision, we'll say, okay, now how sharp and how selective do we want to be? And then once we've made that decision, we take the depth knob and we just crank it all the way up, and then we pull it down and we're like, which one do we like better? Oh, I like a little less, like, and then we go, then we click on soft and we click on hard, and we just we're constantly A/Bing and comparing every single step of the different settings that we apply until we land on, you know, what we like. And you just get used to like doing that with every plugin has its own little workflow. Like you have your order of setting things. You just learn it over time. So there's that. And then put the Fab Filter on there.
And you can see it's just catching those.
Yep. Every time he goes, it like detects it and turns it down a little bit. Then here's with and without the EQ. You probably aren't hearing like huge differences when we're doing this because we're doing it in solo. But if we were doing this in the context of the mix, you would hear why the EQ settings matter. Maybe we should show that, because with that 300 hertz boost, I'm sure that makes the vocals feel like they're a little bit more forward because of that low mid range. And like when you hear it on solo, it's like, oh, there's not much really happening. But then when you put it in the mix, you're like, oh, it makes it go above the guitars.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, it's not much. It's only 2 dB, but that does help push it.
Yeah, on top.
Yeah. And then just delay and reverb, which, you know, everybody's heard that a million times. So we just do that to kind of make the vocals bigger and have more depth.
Is there any reason you guys used an eighth dotted on this as opposed to, for example, a quarter or a half note?
We like dotted delay just in general, I would say. It's just, I don't know, it sounds nicer on ping pong because it creates like a cadence. Like it almost creates like its own little rhythm.
Yeah, especially on screaming, because it just adds like, more of that layered effect. So
yeah, that's why. This is a Nick thing. I don't know about this plugin.
I just love this reverb, like on anything. So very clean sounding. There we go. Sorry.
Yeah, this is a native instrument reverb.
Yep.
And that is everything.